We are Venom.
Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. I have been asked to do this one quite a bit and for quite a few years now, and I don't really know why I haven't attacked it yet, but I thought why not give it a go. So today I am going to try and make a Venom-esque mask, just a half mask. We'll go with like the bottom half. I realize that in a lot of shots and in the movies and stuff like it kind of swipes across, but I like making the little half masks. They fit nice on your face and they look pretty awesome, and I think it'd be relatively easy to template out. So today we are going to make a Venom mask, or at least something creepily close to it. Let's get to building. I made this simple little template that I'm going to now trace onto some 6mm EVA foam to get started. I do my best when I'm tracing to try and get the parts close enough together so that I don't waste too much materials. For the tongue parts, I numbered them to keep them all straight in my head, and I also labeled the parts on the rest of them with either an L for the left side or an R for the right side because a lot of these shapes do look similar. Once traced, I cut them out with my hobby knife. I've already assembled the left side, so I probably need to hit record and show you the right side, so here we go. I like to lay out my pattern into the alignment of how the parts will go together. I apply a layer of contact cement on the edge, let it sit for a few minutes, then once it's no longer wet, start tacking the parts together. Close up the darts first, those are the large V cuts out of the foam, then follow the registration marks. They're the little marks every 1 or 2 inches on the edges of the parts. They're going to help me to align everything together. Because the parts have subtle curves, I didn't really need to heat form any of the parts with a heat gun on this build. The curves of the template helped pull it all into shape. Seems like this would be self-explanatory, but I didn't want to assume. Once both halves are assembled, join them down the middle. I know if I left this part out, I would hear it in the comments below, so here you go. Sometimes I use a phone app called Sketchfab to help me with 3D models to use as reference images. It's a lot easier than trying to find 20 different pictures at different angles to use. I'm gonna warn you, if you plan on building this, understand that a lot of the details were carved in using a rotary tool, so be warned. This part is not on the template, and I used the reference image to kind of help me map out my own version. I have a stone bit on my rotary tool, and I'm slowly adding the details as I make passes. I went ahead and marked on the template the angle that I glued my bottom jaw assembly underneath the cheek. If you didn't want to have the mouth open as wide or have the tongue out, you could change the angle of this to adapt it to your desired angle. The mask is a bit large even on my ginormous head, so you may want to resize it just a little bit, shrink it down a little to help it fit better. I have a video on how to resize templates that I'll try and link somewhere so you can go and watch if you haven't already. For my venomous lips, I cut a 10mm EVA dowel in half and glued it around my fake gum line I carved in earlier. Once it was tacked down, I sanded the transition of the two parts flush with my rotary tool. The mouth inlay, I will admit, looks a bit silly. It serves multiple purposes, so just trust me. It will add stability to the mouth that we'll need later when we add those heavy teeth. It gives the tongue a base to glue to, and it acts as a frame to glue my cloth on the inside of the mask later. You'll barely see this part, and all the teeth are basically going to cover it up, so it's going to look a little goofy before you add the teeth. This is the trickiest part of the pattern, the tongue. I would be willing to bet that it would probably also make for some pretty good horns too. The parts look like they don't go together, but trust the registration marks and work your way across each piece. I did heat form these a little bit to help with the drastic curve of the tongue. Once I assembled it and carved some tongue details and little grooves into it like I saw on the model and basic anatomy knowledge that I have, I was ready to move on to the next part. Any seams that I have issues with later can be patched in with some clay foam. Back to that goofy mouth inlay. I purposely made it a little bit bigger than I needed to so that I could tack my tongue into place and then sand it back to make it nice and flush. This mask might also make for a good Ninja Turtle base. Future idea, just saying. to smooth out my lip transition and fill any seam gaps that I may have from the foam pulling apart, I'm going to use some foam clay. My usual go-to is Foamo from Cosplay Apprentice, and it's basically just a moldable foam that once dry is just like your EVA. You wet the foam clay to make it a little more pliable, and then you wet the surface to allow it to stick to the EVA. I start by filling in the outside of my lips to transition it a little better, then move on to the seams where I have gaps. Eventually most of the surface gets at least a little thin layer over everything. Initially, I was going to carve my teeth all out of foam. Then I saw a video online of a guy using this translucent polymer clay for teeth on a sculpture he was working on, and I thought that could be a game changer on my build, so I thought, let's go to the hobby store and get some. With the video now of both processes, I figured I'd just put them both here for you to see side by side. The foam side is a lot of cutting and sanding and smoothing to get it into shape. The polymer clay is a lot of kneading of the clay to get it malleable, then just simply shaping it with your hands. It wasn't really that difficult. If I made it again, I would probably put a slight curve onto the teeth in the clay so that they don't stick straight out. For some reason, I decided to burn in my teeth holes. I think I thought it would get a better shape for the pocket to wedge the teeth in. You could probably get the same result with the rotary tool and the right shaped bit. Either method you decide to use, make sure and wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area when burning or sanding foam. Sanding causes dust and burning causes fumes. Neither are pleasant for your lungs or sinus cavity. Two coats of Plasti Dip on the foam. We'll wait to glue in the teeth till after the paint job. Now let's move on to paint. I know you're wondering why I put gray Plasti Dip, because, Venom's black. I'd like to say that it was because the red will be a little more vibrant if I use the gray and I'll have to use less coats, but in reality, I thought I'd grab black. It was 30 degrees outside and I had to do the water bath trick to heat up my foam so that it would spray properly, and I didn't want to have to wait for another bath to do the black, so it's great. Frame and frame, just to show you, even with a simple color scheme like Venom, it takes a lot of layers, especially on the gums and the tongue. I use brushes, sponges, and multiple washes to get the desired color that I want, and the great thing about using paint is that you just keep adding paint until you're satisfied with the way it looks. All in all, I probably put at least 10 or more layers of paint before I was happy with the color. Time to glue on the teeth. I super glue them into the cavity, starting with the inner rows, then working my way around on the outer. Obviously that would be easier than trying to glue up under them bad boys. Once they were glued in, I had to dirty them up a bit to make them look a little nasty. I just used some watered down acrylic paint in yellow and orange in light passes. Nothing on the tips of the teeth. he still kind of looks too clean to me, so I decided to add a little bit of 5-minute epoxy to simulate some drool. It'll give my paint job a little shine and add another little texture of detail. I squeeze out equal parts just out of frame so that you can't see me mixing it thoroughly, and then slather it on with a cheap chip brush. I thought about doing another layer and like mixing a little red to simulate blood, but I decided let's make his mouth pre-kill. Probably should have worn gloves while doing this, but I was pretty careful and not trying to get it on my skin. It could probably cause some irritation, and overexposure could probably lead to problems down the road, but do as I say, not as I do. Wear some gloves. To finish it off, I'm gluing some black cloth across my opening on the inside to hide my face. It's just an old black t-shirt that I cut up into little pieces, and now I'm super gluing it onto the inlay. Then to finish the build up, I added some elastic strapping, sandwiching it between some small squares of 2mm EVA and the mask. After that, the build's pretty much done. Time to put it on and creep people out. And we are finished. Here is the end result. It is super creepy looking. The tongue turned out a lot better than I thought it would, and I definitely think that adding that 5-minute epoxy to get that drool effect on it over the teeth and the tongue area and dripping off the side definitely works for the mask and kind of sends it over the top with the nastiness. But I was kind of unsure about these fangs using that Kato polymer clay stuff, but it works. And what's cool about it is because it's semi-translucent, it's a lot like your teeth are, so it does give off that vibe. I definitely think I probably went a little too big with my fangs, but I think it looks pretty gnarly. Yeah. Maybe you'll try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to make something super creepy that's going to freak them out every time you walk past them with it on, or if it's sitting on a shelf and they think they may get possessed by some symbiote and have to, like, eat people. Gross. Maybe you'll get some...
Outstanding.
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these, tell them... Much props. I don't really want to eat you, but I feel like when I put the mask on, it's like he wants me to eat you, so... If you enjoyed this creepy mask build and want to see more just like it, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.